Okay, so right off the bat, a quick disclaimer. This post is not going to be popular. I'm going to talk about stretching. Many of you are limited in terms of your access to your massage therapist at the moment. Many of you are also just choosing to use this time productively and work on areas that you don't often get a chance to prioritize. And as a result, a lot of you are going to be stretching. There's tons of mobility routines that are going up online right now. I even put one out a few years ago, but I'm going to recommend that you don't do those things. And I'm going to explain why I've been anti-stretching for about 4 years now. And interestingly, during that period of time, I haven't lost any range of motion. And in terms of experiencing day-to-day tightness, I can tell you that that's drastically reduced. And we're going to talk about why that is and what the alternatives are later in the video. Now, first of all, I just want to talk about the uncontroversial stuff. We know that if you stretch before physical activity, you're going to increase your risk of injury and you're going to reduce performance. Easy. So you stretch after exercise, surely. Well, let's talk about why you might choose to stretch. So first of all, you might just want to improve your flexibility in the same way you want to improve your strength or your endurance or your speed. It's just something you want to improve. Well, flexibility is interesting because it's the only recognized component of fitness that has no correlation to longevity or to performance. That should tell you something. So let's be a bit more specific. Maybe you want to improve a certain range of motion. So say you can't hit depth in a squat, so you're working on your ankle range of motion or your hip flexion. Now the thing is, if we talk about functional tasks, so we're taking being able to do the splits off the table for now. If we talk about just being able to do a squat or to be able to sprint, the vast majority of people do not have an issue with range of motion. If you can bend your knees a little bit and if you can pull your knee up to your chest, you should be able to do a squat. I've personally coached quite a few people who are very flexible, so I've seen someone who can do the splits both ways. They can sit in a lotus position, but they couldn't hit a bodyweight squat to full depth. So why is that? Well, stretching is going to condition your muscles to be passive, but functional range of motion requires your body to be active. So why can't these people hit full depth squat? It's not because of range of motion, it's because of neural intolerance. It is your nervous system freaking out because it doesn't like the combination of a stretch with the tension. Understanding this is why in nearly 10 years of coaching people how to squat, I've never had to put plates under someone's heels. Tell a lie. There's one person I had to put plates under their heels, and that person had suffered some significant ankle trauma. But everyone else, they don't need plates under their heels because it's not their dorsiflexion that's lacking, it's their neural intolerance. So pretty much, to make it simple, it's a strength issue. It might even just be a relative strength issue where their quads don't want to load in that very specific position. It might not even be their quads, it might be somewhere else up and down the chain. The muscles that connect to the quads just might be limiting that specific position. Instead, what these people need is a graded exposure to that position and a bit of strength work. Now, the convenient thing is that we know that putting a muscle through a loaded range of motion has better lengthening outcomes than stretching anyway. You're better off doing a loaded Romanian deadlift to improve your hamstring flexibility than just sitting in a hamstring stretch to try and touch your toes. The other thing to understand is that muscles connect to other muscles. So if you can't touch your toes and you're stretching your hamstrings all the time, that might not even be the issue. You can do a test right now where if you reach to touch your toes and then you roll your foot on a ball and basically give your foot a little bit of a massage, you'll probably get further when you retest that stretch because your plantar fascia on the sole of your foot connects to your hamstring, and that can affect the range of motion. Another example, if you've got rounded shoulders and you're doing your doorway stretch every single day, that might not make a difference if your pecs are being pulled into that position by tight adductors. You might need to release your adductors to relieve yourself of rounded shoulders. And that's not something you're going to be able to achieve with an isolated stretch. So another reason you might choose to stretch is to reduce the sensation of tightness. And in some ways, that might be a dysfunctional goal because tightness and tension is essential for optimal performance and even just to control your posture. If you eliminate your body's ability to create or sustain tension, that might be the source of your pain after all, not actually the tightness itself. So if you're going through a sprint and your leg comes up to here, if you don't feel a stretch in this position, there's nothing telling you to reflexively pull back down. If you don't feel a stretch at the bottom of your bench press, you've got no elastic recoil from your muscles to actually press the weight. But let's say you've got a dysfunctional level of tightness and it's actually negatively affecting your ability to move, or you're in constant chronic pain. Can you ever tell me that stretching on its own has ever alleviated that situation? If you can, you're a unicorn. I've never experienced that. I've never seen anyone else experience that. And usually they have to have a secondary intervention on top of what they're doing to alleviate the issue. And it might have been easier to treat if you weren't stretching in the first place. Here's a quick example of why. Because if you've got a knot in your muscle, like a knot in this band, you apply a stretch, you might just be stretching the area around where that site of discomfort is, and you're not actually treating the part of the muscle that needs the intervention. Now, to understand tightness, you need to understand fascia. So if you've ever bought meat from the butcher and you notice that the meat's got that kind of see-through casing on it, that's fascia. It wraps around your muscles, it wraps around your bones, your organs. It is what your tendons and ligaments are made of, and it connects all through your body in a big web. And it's supposed to be in layers that can glide over each other nice and easily. And what happens is that fascia, or that area of fascia, gets a bit dehydrated and a bit claggy and it gets stuck, and that's tightness. Those layers can't glide over one another. So how do you resolve that issue? Well, you need to rehydrate that area. It's dehydrated. How do you do that? You squeeze fluid into it through muscular tension. So moving around, doing loaded exercise. You can achieve that a little bit as well through myofascial release or massage, where you can literally compress the muscle and squeeze water into that area. And the other good bit of news from that point of view is that muscular tension is what allows you to recover and to clear waste from your muscles in the first place. Your lymphatic system is the system that takes away waste from your muscles, and that can only operate with muscular tension. Stretching is not going to do that. You need compression on the muscle, and the best way to do that is through movement. Motion is lotion. Now let's say you're trying to get some movement back into that fascia, you're trying to get those layers gliding by stretching. So what we've got here, plastic bag. What we can see is that we can apply massage and those layers can glide. If we get a specific isolated stretch, I hope you can see this. If I stretch like that, what you see happens is this little, what I call like a stretch scar in the tissue. And what you'll notice is that it loses its elastic properties. So as I pull it, it doesn't want to go back to the position it was ever in. It hasn't changed much about the way that the tissue's moving itself. But what it does do is reduce its contractile ability. Your muscles kind of operate in the same way. They need the elasticity to operate properly. Now, the final reason you might choose to stretch is that it feels good. Now, lots of things feel good, they aren't necessarily useful. The reason that stretching feels good is the reason it works. The goal of stretching, if it works, is not actually to even lengthen a muscle, it's to sever that connection between the muscle and the brain. This is why PNS stretching works. You condition your brain to stop thinking about that muscle, and that's very rarely a good option for you. A little analogy is that drinking alcohol you can use to reduce certain other kinds of tension, the tension that comes with sobriety. If you are sober, that's going to be associated with some negative sensations like inhibition or anxiety. And just like muscular tension, that has to be a somewhat unpleasant, uncomfortable feeling, because that's what gives you the intention to change your behavior. The tightness is what is going to give your body the response to change position, and that anxiety and those inhibitions are going to give you, hopefully, a functional level of intention to change your behavior. If not, you might just choose to drink more alcohol, or you could choose to be productive to alleviate those stressful feelings. So let's talk about what is productive in terms of stretching, in terms of how to get range of motion into your muscles, and how to reduce dysfunctional levels of tightness. So what can you do instead of stretching to reduce muscular tension or to improve your movement? Well, as I've already talked about, you can train your muscles through a full range of motion, and you can do it with tension and load. If you do it with tension, you're going to bring your brain along for the ride. You're not going to just leave it to one side, which is what stretching largely does. And even better than that, you can train integrated movement. So you can train entire myofascial chains of muscles, what we call slings. You can check out my video about slings on YouTube as well. And if you can train all of those in an integrated manner, you're going to retain a pretty good range of motion. Alternatively, you can use myofascial release, so massage is a great option. Using tennis balls or different implements along those lines can be really helpful. Different muscles can be awkward to get to with different tools, so have a wide array of tools at your disposal for that. Cupping is a really good option as well. So instead of a compressive method, it's actually a decompressive method of getting movement back into the fascia. I've got another little analogy from that point of view. If you go to a hotel and they tuck the bed sheets under the mattress in really tightly, you'll get a little bit of movement, a little bit of freedom in those sheets if you press down hard on the bed, but not as much as if you go to where they're tucked in and pull them out in a decompressive way. That's sort of why cupping works so well as a myofascial release technique. If you're using a compressive method, 2 minutes on any particular site of tension is the therapeutic dose. Alternatively, you need to be doing practices that allow your body to enter what's called a parasympathetic state. Your nervous system transitions between fight and flight and rest and digest, in simple terms. A lot of us are stuck in this constant sense of fight or flight. And what happens when we're stressed is that we wear that stress on our fascia and on our tissue. What happens the moment you're stressed? Your shoulders start to come up. You start to get knots in your tummy. You start to slouch forward. Your posture gets compromised and your movement gets compromised. If you can relax and enter a parasympathetic state, you'll start to move a little bit better. Now, how do you go about doing that? Well, as I've talked about in a previous video, if you live your life in as natural a way as possible, your body's going to operate within its natural sort of limits and standards. If you start incorporating behaviors that are unnatural, your body's going to see that as a source of stress. It's not going to know exactly what it's supposed to do, and typically that's going to put you in this fight or flight situation. So what sort of things are unnatural? Well, there's quite a few depending on your history of evolution, but something like potentially eating grains could be stressful for some people. We haven't evolved the digestive enzymes to be able to metabolize them particularly well. Sitting still or lying still for long periods of time, so basically being immobile. Eating excessive calories, that's also not something that the human body is particularly accustomed to over the course of its history. Exposure to unnatural light, that is actually a source of stress. So if you've got blue lights on in the house late into the night, or if you're staying up and you're looking at blue screens and you've changed your sleep cycle and you're not getting morning sunlight, that's another one. Getting outside into nature. If you're never getting outside, your body's just going to think that it's in a cage and it's going to treat that like you're in trouble and you're going to get a stress response. There's tons of others. Just start Googling parasympathetic nervous system, start informing yourself about circadian rhythms as well, and how all of those can be used in your daily behaviors to enable your body to enter a parasympathetic state a little more easily. That's going to help reduce tension. And if that means that you don't have to go through a stretching protocol, or you don't even need to do myofascial release, then that's ideal. You're living in a functional way and your body's going to thank you for it.